Jack felt the crash before he opened his eyes. The burning metal sent the trembling ground. The sound of sparks flying and strange humming filled his ears. His ship was gone, he knew that much. But he was alive, bruised, breathing, and stranded on a planet he did not recognize. The air was warm to warm. The sky above shimmered like silk in liquid motion, and the trees were tall, glowing purple, with roots that pulsed like veins. Jack sat up, his ribs aching, and tried to remember what happened. Before the hyperspace jump failed, he was delivering medical supplies to a frontier station. Then everything blinked white, and now he was here. As he stood, his legs shaky, he realized how silent the place was. Not a bird, not a whisper, not a breeze. Yet something in the silence felt watched. He scanned the trees' shadows, dancing in between glowing trunks. Then a flash, movement quick like lightning, a figure hiding behind one of the trees. Not human, the silhouette was taller, leaner, but the shape was still vaguely female, and that confused him more than frightened him. Jack took a careful step forward and spoke gently. I am not here to harm anyone. I crashed here. I need help. His voice echoed strangely across the forest, and for a moment there was no response. Then the figure moved again, stepping closer, this time not trying to hide. Jack's breath caught as he saw her clearly for the first time. Her skin shimmered with shades of violet and silver. Her eyes were glowing like twin moons. Her long white hair floated as if underwater, and she wore nothing but a translucent fabric that fluttered though there was no wind. Her gaze locked onto him, not with fear, but with fascination. You are human, she said, and her voice was musical like chords on a harp, soft but layered with hidden power. Jack nodded, cautiously surprised that she knew what a human was. The alien girl stepped even closer, until she was barely a few feet away, her eyes studying his face, his shoulders, his chest, as if each part of him was some sacred artifact from an ancient Ptolemy. Name is Jack, he said slowly. Who are you? And where am I? The girl blinked and tilted her head. I am Zira. This place is my home. We call it Illyria. You are the first of your kind to stand on our soil, but I have read about you. I know about your body, your warmth, your softness, your instincts, and your strength. She walked a circle around him as she spoke, her words not threatening, but curious, intimate, almost reverent. Jack shifted uncomfortably, but something about her presence made him freeze, not in fear, but in a strange magnetic way. Zira reached out her hand as if to touch him, but stopped inches away, then whispered, may I? Jack hesitated, then nodded, and her fingers touched his forearm lightly and then slid slowly up to his bicep. Her face lit up in wonder, as if she had just touched fire for the first time. Your skin, it is not like ours, yours breathes, she said softly. Her other hand gently touched the side of his neck. You carry heat, you pulse like the roots of our world, but louder, deeper. Jack cleared his throat, trying to stay composed. I think I need medical help. I might have broken a rib or two. Zira stepped back reluctantly, then gestured with her hand. Follow me. I will take you to the healing pool. It is not far. Your kind will not understand its energy, but it will help your body and your soul. Jack followed her through a glowing path of soft moss and crystalline petals, and the air smelled sweet like honey and spice. The deeper they walked, the more Jack felt his body humming in response to the environment, as if something here was tuning into him. After a short walk, they reached a shimmering pool, glowing with blue light at its center. Zira knelt beside it and scooped some of the water in her hand before gently rubbing it onto Jack's bruised ribs. The coolness spread instantly, and with it a soothing wave that dulled the pain. Jack gasped and stared at her in amaze. This is not water, he said, more to himself than to her. Zira smiled and replied, no, it is life. It recognizes hurt and restores balance. Your body speaks, and it listens. Jack sat down beside the pool, his eyes on her face. Tell me why you touch me like that back there. Why study me like some relic? Zira's smile faded to something softer, something honest. I have read about humans, but I never felt one, never saw one. Your kind is rare. Your emotions are visible through your body. Your anger makes your muscles tight. Your fear makes your heart beat fast. Your joy lights up your face. We do not have that. Our faces do not change. Our skin is cold. We study. We do not feel. But you are alive in ways we envy. Jack looked at her, stunned, not sure what to say, as the glow of the pool shimmered between them, and the stars above Illyria began to blink into the sky one by one. She watched him not as a stranger, but as something beautiful, unknown, and sacred. And Jack knew in that moment this encounter was not just a crash or a rescue. It was something far deeper, something that would change them both forever. Jack woke up near the glowing pool. His body felt better, stronger, as if the water had done more than heal his injuries. He turned his head and saw Zira sitting beside him, her eyes watching his chest rise and fall with every breath. She looked at him, not like a doctor or a stranger, but like someone who was trying to memorize every movement, every texture, every shift of muscle under skin. Her fingers traced invisible lines on the ground, but her gaze never left him. You breathe in rhythm She said softly, your chest expands, your ribs move like waves, and your throat hums with sound. Even when you sleep, do you know how loud you are? To Jack sat up slowly, still amazed at how much better he felt, and said, I guess humans are noisy creatures. We breathe, we sweat, we bleed, and we cry. I suppose your kind does none of that. Zira shook her head gently. We do not cry. Our eyes do not carry emotion. Our sweat does not speak. Our skin does not scar. Our bodies are stable, efficient, but they do not tell stories like yours do. She leaned closer, her hand moving toward his bare arm again, this time resting fully against him. Warm and firm, your skin changes temperature, your body reveals fear and excitement without your words. Jack felt his pulse quicken, not just from her touch, but from her presence. Zira was unlike anyone he had ever met, not just alien, but raw, unfiltered. Her curiosity felt intimate, like she wanted to understand not only his biology, but his being. He looked into her glowing eyes and asked, do you always touch strangers like this? Or am I some kind of rare specimen? Zira tilted her head and answered, in my culture, touch is not shameful, it is not forbidden. We learn through sensation, through vibration, through presence. Your people hide behind fabric and layers and distance, but I see that you still respond. You are not used to being studied like this. Jack chuckled nervously and said, not exactly. Most humans would call this weird, maybe even invasive. But I suppose I did crash into your world uninvited. Zira reached behind her and pulled out a small glowing sphere. She held it up, and it began to project floating diagrams of human anatomy, muscles, nerves, blood vessels, even reproductive systems. Jack raised his eyebrows and asked, how do you have this information? Have studied your kind from afar. Zira replied, we intercepted signals, data, biological codes from ancient human broadcasts. I memorized everything I could. But it is not the same as touching, seeing, feeling in real time. I knew what a human looked like, but I never understood until you. Jack looked at the floating image of his own body, rotating slowly in the air, and felt strangely exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. Zira stood and stepped toward him, once more, this time placing her hand gently on his chest, just over his heart. Your pulse is strong, she said, and I feel something inside you. It rises when I am near you. Have no armor, but you have power, not just in your muscles, but in your reactions, your emotions, your instincts. They are beautiful. Jack swallowed hard and whispered, you are talking like someone who wants more than knowledge. Zira looked down, then back into his eyes, her face unreadable yet full of a quiet fire. I want to know everything, not because I need to, but because I want to. Your species feels deeply, and that fascinates me. You carry memories in your body, joy in your skin, grief in your shoulders. Your eyes speak louder than your words. Jack hesitated, then touched her hand resting on his chest and asked, what do you feel right now when I touch you? Zira closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. I feel warmth, not from the air, but from you. Your touch is not functional, it is emotional. It carries intention, care, maybe confusion and fear, but also curiosity and trust. Jack nodded quietly and said, maybe you are feeling what we call connection. It happens when two people begin to understand each other, not just with their minds, but with their presence, with their chocha. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him as if something inside her had shifted. I want to feel more than I want to learn what it means to connect like humans, do not just touch, but bond. Before Jack could reply, a sharp humming noise echoed through the air. A pulse of light rippled from the trees, and Zira stepped back, her expression darkening. She held up a hand and whispered, they are calling me. I should not be here this long with Yauho. Are they? Jack asked, standing up with sudden concern. Watchers, Zira said. They monitor contact with foreign species. They believe too much interaction corrupts our essence. And I have already crossed lines. Jack grabbed her wrist gently and said, are you in danger? Zira stared at him, her voice softer than before. Maybe, but I do not care. I have touched something real, something I could never learn from data or holograms. Your presence is rewriting everything I thought I knew. Jack held her hand tightly and said, then stay a little longer. I want to understand to not just you, but your world, and maybe we can learn together. Zira looked at their joined hands, and for the first time she smiled, not just with her mouth, but with her whole face. Her glow pulsed brighter, and she said, then let us continue. Let me show you more, but remember, Jack, once we begin there is no going back. Jack followed Zira through a narrow path that wound deep into the forest. The trees leaned inward, their glowing roots creating a soft floor beneath their feet, as if the world itself was watching their every step. They did not speak much, but the silence between them felt rich, not awkward, and every once in a while Zira would glance at him with a look that made his chest tighten, not with fear, but with something he could not name yet. Soon they arrived at an archway made of woven vines and crystal threads. Zira stepped through and motioned for Jack to follow. Inside was a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were smooth, glowing, stone-etched, with carvings of bodies, some alien, some human, some unrecognizable. In the center was a pedestal with a floating orb that pulsed softly in rhythm with Jack's heartbeat. "What is this place?" he asked, stepping closer, his voice echoing faintly through the chamber. Zira placed a hand on the wall and whispered, "This is the vault of sensory memory. Our ancestors built it to preserve the experience of physical existence. When we lost the need for sensation, we stored the memories here. I come here often to remember what was lost, but now with you I see more than memory. I see possibility." Jack looked around at the images. One depicted a human hand reaching toward a glowing shape. Another showed two figures entwined in a way that suggested more than science. It suggested emotion, desire, even love. His eyes drifted back to Zira, and he asked, "Do your people not feel anything at all?" Zira turned to him slowly and replied, "We feel, but not like you. Our emotions are thin, quiet, like whispers that never rise to shouts. We observe, we record, we reflect, but you ignite, you tremble, you burn. That is why I brought you here, because I want to understand, not just through data, but through shared experience." Jack felt his pulse rise again as she stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. His mind screamed caution, but his heart said stay, listen, feel. Her presence was magnetic, overwhelming, and yet gentle. Her hand rose again, this time touching his chest, then sliding slowly up to his neck, tracing the curve of his jaw. "Your body changes with every feeling," she said softly. "Your skin warms, your breath shortens, your muscles tighten. I feel it all, and it makes me ache to know more, to be more." Jack placed his hand over hers and said, "If you want to feel what I feel, you have to understand that humans do not just touch with their hands. We touch with memories, with trust, with vulnerability. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it heals, but it is never just physical." Zira nodded and whispered, "Then teach me, let me feel not just skin, but soul. Tell me what you think when you see me, what you fear, what you hope when you wake in a strange world, with a stranger like me." Jack stepped back slightly, needing space to gather his thoughts. He looked at her glowing face and said, "When I saw you for the first time, I felt fear, but not because you were dangerous, because you were unknown. When you touched me, I felt exposed, not just my body, but my story. And now I feel something heavier, something warmer. I think it might be the start of trust, or maybe something more." Zira walked to the pedestal and placed her palm on the orb. It flared with light, and the chamber filled with soft humming energy. The carvings on the walls began to shimmer and shift, showing images from human life, cities, oceans, fire, children running, lovers holding each other under stars. Jack saw glimpses of Earth and felt a pang of longing, but also peace. "These are your memories," Zira said, her voice full of wonder. "I pulled them from your mind while you rested. They are beautiful, full of sound and chaos and color. Our memories are silent still, but yours dance like flame." Jack watched as one image hovered in the air, a memory of him holding hands with someone back on Earth, a moment filled with pain and goodbye. Zira saw his expression and asked, "Who is that?" "Simeon. I lost," Jack replied quietly. "Someone who taught me that love is not always forever, but it is always real." Zira looked at the image and then at him, her eyes glowing brighter than before. "I want to know what it means to love, not just from stories, but from the way it lives inside your body, your breath, your heartbeat." Jack walked to her and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, then let it slide down her arm. His touch was careful, deliberate, and filled with something more than curiosity. He said, "Love begins when two people choose to understand each other, even when they are different, even when they are afraid. And right now I am choosing to understand you." Zira leaned into his touch, her face inches from his, and whispered, "Then let me understand you, to let me feel everything." The orb above them pulsed brighter, casting waves of light across the chamber, and Jack knew something had changed, not just in Zira, but in himself. What began as curiosity had become connection, and what started as survival had turned into something deeper, something neither of them fully understood yet, but both were ready to explore. Jack and Zira left the vault hand in hand, their bodies close, but their minds closer. They moved through the forest in silence, but it was not the silence of strangers, it was the silence of two beings listening to the same rhythm. Their feet found the same steps, their breath aligned without trying, and the world around them responded. The glowing plants leaned in their light brighter, their roots pulsing in sync with the heartbeat of something ancient. An awakening. Zira led him to a hidden grove deep beneath a curtain of vines, where the ground was soft like velvet, and the trees bent overhead, forming a dome of light and shadow. "Here," she said, "is where we come to become more. It is a place for merging, not of bodies alone, but of understanding, of intention, of memory." Jack looked around the grove and felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from anticipation. His thoughts ran wild with images of Earth, of Zira, of what it meant to belong somewhere. He turned to her and asked, "What happens when two beings from different worlds try to merge? What if we are not meant to understand each other?" Thursra stepped closer, fingers touching his face gently, and said, perhaps understanding is not the goal, perhaps feeling is enough. Your kind seeks meaning through logic, mine through energy. But what we share is not made of either, it is made of choice. Jack exhaled slowly and nodded. Then I choose to be here, I choose to trust you even if I do not understand all of this. Shira smiled and took his hands, placing them over her chest. Her skin was warm like sunlit stone, and beneath it, he could feel a faint vibration, not a heartbeat, but something steady like the hum of a distant star. We do not have hearts like yours, she whispered. But I feel something now. Where there was silence, there is now music. You have changed. Methy sat together in the center of the grove, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her, and for a while, the only sound was the gentle song of the forest around them. The moment felt endless, yet fragile like a dream just before waking. And then the silence broke. A sharp tone echoed through the air, like a bell shattering glass. Zira's body tensed, her eyes wide with fear, and she stood quickly, her glow dimming. They found us, she said breathlessly. They know. I have bonded with you. Jack stood beside her, ready for anything, and asked, who found us? What will they do? The Enclave, she answered. They are the keepers of our purity. They believe contact with other species corrupts our essence. They warned me not to touch you, not to feel, but I disobeyed, and now they will come to separate us, to erase what we share. Jack clenched his fists and said, I will not let them take you. Not after everything we have felt together. Zira looked at him, her eyes trembling with emotion, then took a deep breath and whispered, then we must leave. The grove is sacred but not protected. They will breach it soon, and I will not let them harm you. They ran through the glowing forest together, the ground shaking as pulses of energy moved through the air, a sign that the Enclave was drawing near. Zira's glow flickered with urgency, and Jack could feel the tension in every step. They reached a narrow canyon where ancient trees formed a wall, and Zira placed her hand on a glowing stone etched with symbols. The wall opened, revealing a hidden passage. She grabbed his hand and pulled him through the tunnel lit by soft golden light. Where are we going? Jack asked, breathless. From the Runto, the Heartstone, she replied. It is the core of our planet. It listens to truth and responds only to those who are honest. If we reach it, perhaps it will protect us, or at least show us the next path. They emerged into a vast chamber, where a massive crystal pulsed with light. It stood tall like a mountain, its surface alive with color and movement. Jack stared in awe while Zira knelt before it, whispering in her language, her voice trembling with urgency and hope. The crystal responded with a low hum, and light poured from its core, bathing them in warmth. Zira turned to Jack and said, it has heard me, it sees our bond, it knows we are not enemies, but mirrors. We reflect what the other lacks, and that is not impurity, it is balance. Before Jack could speak, the chamber shook, and a group of tall glowing figures entered through the far wall, their faces covered with veils, their bodies rigid with authority. The Enclave had Aravid. Zira stood tall, her voice steady and powerful. I have not betrayed our kind. I have discovered what we lost in pursuit of purity. I found depth in difference. I found emotion in touch. I found a soul in a human. The tallest figure stepped forward and said, you have become infected with chaos. You must return to be cleansed. Jack stepped between them, his voice fierce. She is not infected, she is awakened. If you cannot see that, then maybe it is you who needs cleansing. The Enclave raised their hands, energy crackling in the air, but before they could strike, the Heartstone pulsed with blinding light. A shockwave spread through the chamber, forcing everyone back. The crystal spoke in a voice that echoed in every mind. Connection is not weakness, emotion is not impurity. Protect what binds, protect what heals. The Enclave froze, their power silenced by the judgment of the ancient core, and Zira reached for Jack, her eyes filled with tears, not of water, but of pure light, and said, we are not alone anymore. We are part of something larger now. There inside the chamber was still glowing, but now it carried a different weight, the kind of weight that pressed on the soul, and not the body. Zira stood with Jack before the Heartstone, her body pulsing with waves of emotion she had never felt before, emotions she could not name yet, but ones that made her feel more alive than ever. Her fingers wrapped around Jack's, as if anchoring herself to the only thing that made sense in a world that was turning against her. The Enclave had not left, but they had not attacked either. They stood silent, stunned by the Heartstone's judgment, as if unable to process that something so ancient had spoken in defense of a human. One of the veiled figures finally stepped forward and raised a trembling hand, pointing at Zira with a voice filled with disbelief and anger. You have let your form be altered by outside energy. You are no longer of us. You must be cast out. Zira's eyes narrowed and her voice grew stronger than ever. If I am no longer of you, then I will make my own path. I do not need to belong to a people who fear what they cannot feel. I have seen beauty in what you call chaos. I have found clarity in what you call corruption, and I will not return to a silence that steals the truth from my heart. Jack stepped forward, his stance unshaken by the presence of the Enclave. He looked at them and said she has done nothing wrong. If anything, she has done what all of you have forgotten. She has dared to learn, she has dared to feel, and if that is a crime, then I will stand with her. Against your rules, against your Firth enclave began to glow brighter, their energy rising, like a storm ready to explode, but the Heartstone pulsed again, and its voice echoed one more time. Choice is sacred, the path of feeling is not a curse, it is a key. Those who seek understanding must be free to walk without chains, without judgment, without fear. Suddenly the chamber shook, and the ground beneath them cracked. The ancient crystal was reacting to something deeper, something moving through the core of the planet. Zira gasped and turned to Jack, her voice urgent. The Heartstone is protecting us, but it cannot stop what is coming. The Enclave has triggered a purge protocol. They will destroy this place to remove me, to erase the memory of what I have done. Jack grabbed her shoulders, his eyes locked with hers. Then we run, we escape, we survive, and we tell the story to the stars, so they know what you did here, that you chose truth over silence. Zira nodded and led him through another tunnel, this one older, less stable. The walls trembled, and dust fell around them as the ground rumbled beneath their feet. Behind them, a roar echoed as energy burst from the Heartstone, shattering the chamber and sending waves of light chasing them through the narrow path. They emerged into the open. Just as the forest began to quake, the trees flickered, the sky darkened, and the air filled with a high-pitched sound that made Jack's bones vibrate. Zira looked back, tears of light trailing down her cheeks. This world was once beautiful, it still is, she whispered, but now it is breaking because I chose to feel. Jack took her hand and said, then we will make a new world somewhere out there, somewhere we are not feared. For feeling, they ran toward the old ridge, where Jack's ship had crashed, its remains still scattered across the clearing. But Zira pointed to a hidden structure near the edge of the valley, a dormant transport pod, one of the old planetary escape vessels sealed long ago. I can power it, she said breathlessly, but it will need time to charge. Keep them away while I unlock it. Jack stood in front of the pod, his hands clenched, his body tense as the first wave of Enclave soldiers appeared through the trees. They moved with speed and precision, but Jack moved faster. He used the terrain, the shadows, the broken parts of his ship to block and distract. Every move he made was fueled not by training, but by purpose. He was not just defending himself, he was protecting a bond that defied species and history behind him. Zira channeled her energy into the pod, her hands glowing, her eyes focused, every pulse of her power a defiance of her past, every spark a declaration of her future. As the pod began to hum with life, the Enclave closed in, and Jack was pushed back first to the ground by a shockwave. One of the soldiers raised a weapon, but before it struck, Zira screamed and unleashed a burst of light that blinded everyone in the clearing. When the light faded, the soldiers were down, not dead, but stunned, their armor cracked, their pride shattered. Zira stood with Jack's body in her arms, glowing brighter than ever. She whispered, wake up, Jack, please wake up. Jack stirred slowly, his eyes opening. To her face he smiled weakly and said, I told you I would stand with you. The pod behind them opened its doors, light spilling out like a promise, and Zira helped him inside, sealing the entrance. As more soldiers arrived too late to stop them, she activated the controls and the pod lifted from the ground, its engines roaring to life. They rose above the forest, above the trembling trees and the broken crystal below. Zira held Jack close, her voice soft but fierce. I do not regret choosing you. I do not regret feeling. I only regret that my people could not see the beauty in what we became. Jack leaned his head against hers and whispered, then we will show them. We will show the galaxy that love is not weakness, that connection is not infection, that emotion is not a threat, but a gift. Stars outside the escape pod shimmered like scattered fire as Zira piloted the vessel through layers of clouds and broken atmosphere. Her hands moved across the controls with precision, but her eyes kept returning to Jack, who lay in the recovery seat, his body bruised, but healing, his breath steady. She had poured much of her energy into him during the last battle, and now that they were safe above the planet, a strange quiet settled between them, not empty, but heavy with the weight of everything they had survived. Zira looked out the viewport as the planet shrank behind them, its glowing forests, its ancient crystal chambers, its people who had rejected her fading into the distance. She had never left Illyria before, had never imagined needing to, but now she felt no fear in the unknown, only hope, only the desire to hold on to what she had found beside her. Jack stirred and slowly sat up, his voice raw and quiet. Where are we going? Zira turned to him, her expression soft. I do not know yet, but I am following the pull, the same pull that brought me to you, that told me your touch was not poison but light. I think somewhere out there, the universe is waiting for something new, something we can build. Jack nodded, rubbing the back of his neck, his thoughts racing. This was more than survival, more than escape. They had challenged a society that feared emotion, and they had not just lived, but changed each other. His voice steadied, and he said, "Tell me something. What was it exactly that made you notice me from the start?" Zira smiled, a small laugh in her voice. "You moved like fire," she said, "not just your body, but your presence. You burned through the silence without even trying. You carried memories in your eyes, stories in your voice, and when I touched you I felt heat, not from your skin, but from everything you had lived through. I had studied humans for years, but you were the first to make my data feel alive." Jack looked at her and said, "Then tell me what you feel now, right now, in this moment. No science, just heart." Zira stepped closer, her fingers brushing his jaw slowly. "I feel like I was blind before you, like I was floating through existence without knowing I could fall, like I was waiting to be broken open, and now I am, and it hurts, but it also heals." Jack reached for her and pulled her gently onto the seat beside him. Their foreheads touched, and the quiet hum of the pod surrounded them, not just as a sound, but as a rhythm, a reminder that they were moving together now, away from everything and towards something new. As they floated deeper into space, Zira activated the scanning system. The screen lit up with distant star systems, some marked, some unknown. Jack leaned over and pointed to a planet near a red dwarf. "What about that?" Zira scanned it and smiled. "Breathable atmosphere, low population, strong magnetic fields. We could hide there for a while. Learn, build, recover." The pod changed direction, and Jack sat back watching her as she steered through the void. He had never expected this, never imagined that a crash would lead him into something so deep, so impossible. He thought about Earth, about the rules, the barriers, the labels that kept people apart, and wondered if maybe Zira had given him more than escape. Maybe she had given him a mirror to see what being human really meant. Hours passed. The pod entered orbit around the red planet, its skies tinged with gold, its land rich with crystalline structures and silver trees. They landed softly in a valley surrounded by hills and glowing plants, unlike anything either of them had seen. They stepped out hand in hand, the air warm and sweet, the wind gentle across their faces. Jack looked around and said, "It feels like this place is waiting for something." Zira nodded and whispered, "Maybe it is waiting for us to make it more than just a place. Maybe it is waiting to become home." They spent the next days building a shelter from the pod and local materials, sharing stories under the stars, teaching each other not just language or history, but gestures, memories, hopes. Jack showed her how humans plant seeds, not just in soil, but in the future. Zira showed him how her people listen to the earth, how they feel its pulse through their feet, how silence is not emptiness, but potential. Only night, as they sat by a fire made from alien wood that shimmered blue, Zira turned to him, her face lit by the flames, and said, "Jack, I have something to tell you, something I have been feeling since we arrived." Jack looked into her eyes and nodded. Telmesh took his hand and placed it over her chest. "I think I am changing, not just because of the pod or the power I used, but because of you. I feel things I never knew I could. I dream in colors I never imagined. I ache in places I never knew existed. And when I see you, when I touch you, I feel like I am becoming human, not in shape, but in spirit." Jack stared at her, his own heart pounding, and said, "Then let me show you what it truly means to be human. Let me walk beside you, not as a guest or a savior, but as someone who needs you as much as you need him." Zira leaned forward, her lips close to his, and whispered, "Then kiss me, not because you want to, but because you understand that I am no longer just learning, I am choosing." They kissed beneath the alien sky, and the stars above seemed to burn brighter, as if the universe itself had been waiting for this moment, for this bond, for this truth. Morning sky over the red planet stretched wide and golden as Zira stepped outside their shelter. The air tasted different that day, soft and full of promise. Jack followed behind her, his footsteps steady, but his mind racing with thoughts he had never dared to think before. They had survived war, rejection, exile, and yet here they stood, not broken, but whole, made stronger by everything they had lost and everything they had found. In each, Thursra walked to the edge of a crystal ridge, her eyes scanning the horizon, her long white hair catching the wind. Jack watched her for a moment from behind, seeing her not as an alien, not as a mystery, but as a part of him. She turned slowly and smiled, the kind of smile that reached past the skin and into the soul. "I used to think I was complete," she said. "I used to believe I understood life through study, through silence, through stillness, but now I know I was only half of something, waiting for the other half to arrive." Jack stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his voice low and certain. "Then we must not waste the gift of that meeting. We are not here just to survive, Zira. We are here to begin again, to shape something greater than either of us." Alan at each other, they returned to their shelter, which now looked less like a crash site and more like a home, the walls lined with tools they built together, maps drawn by hand, systems repaired with joint effort. Zira had learned to use her energy to power the technology, while Jack used his strength to build and protect. They worked in sync, like a heartbeat, like breath and rhythm. Later that day, As they prepared food gathered from the planets strange and beautiful, Flora, a soft alert buzzed from the pod. Zira walked to the console, and her face grew serious. Jack joined her, and saw what she did. A ship in orbit, unknown design, no clear markings, but it was scanning the surface and it had definitely noticed them. You think they are here to hurt us? Jack asked, reaching instinctively for the old plasma tool he had converted into a weapon. Zira shook her head slowly. I do not know, but I do know this. We cannot run again, not forever. We must face what comes, not with fear, but with truth. If they come in peace, we will welcome them. If they come in hate, we will show them what unity looks like. The ship descended hours later and touched down at the far end of the valley. Zira and Jack waited near the entrance of their home, hand in hand, as the hatch opened, and 3 figures stepped out, humanoid, armored, faces hidden, but their movements cautious, deliberate. The lead figure removed their helmet and revealed a face that looked human, but slightly altered. Eyes with golden irises, skin that shimmered faintly like Zira's were the Seekers. The figure said, his voice calm, we monitor transmissions from lost worlds. We intercepted a pulse from your pod and came to investigate your energy signatures. Unlike anything we have seen. Zira stepped forward, her voice calm and proud. I am Zira of Alira, once part of the Enclave, now free by choice. Beside me stands Jack of Earth. We are not lost. We are found. We are not enemies. We are partners. Seeker studied them for a long moment, then asked, and what is your purpose here? Are you building a colony? Are you fleeing? Are you hiding? Jack answered, we are doing none of those things. We are living, learning, changing. This world did not ask for us, but we respect it and each other. We are not a threat unless you choose to make us one. The Seeker nodded slowly, then smiled faintly, a rare thing among his kind. We have searched for meaning across 1,000 stars. We often forget that meaning is not found in technology or conquest, but in connection. Perhaps your bond is the beginning of something the galaxy needs more than ever. The Seekers left the planet a day later, leaving behind supplies and a beacon set to alert others that the world was under peaceful protection. Jack and Zira stood under the stars, watching the ship disappear into the sky, and in that quiet moment, they knew something had changed. Zira turned to Jack, her voice soft and filled with wonder. When I touched your skin, for the first time I thought I was touching data. Now I know I was touching Destinyuk. Pulled her close and said, I once thought I crashed by accident. Now I know I landed in the only place I was meant to be. They stood together as the stars rose, one by one, over their new home, and the planet around them pulsed with life, not just plant or light, but something deeper, a song only to souls who had chosen each other. Good heart. Sun rose over the quiet valley, casting long golden light across the hills and trees that shimmered like fire wrapped in crystal. Jack stood barefoot in the soft soil, his fingers curled around the edge of a stone tablet he had carved for days, its surface smooth, but filled with marks etched with care, every line a memory, every symbol a promise. Zira approached from behind, her presence warm against the cool morning air, her white hair tied back, her eyes glowing not with energy, but with peace. She touched the tablet and traced the carvings with her hand, each line representing a chapter of their journey, from the crash to the rebellion, from exile to love, from fear to purpose. She whispered softly, this is not a record of survival. This is a song of becoming. Jack turned to her, his hand lifting to brush her cheek, and said, we have become something they told us was impossible, not just human and alien, not just male and female, but something new, something whole. They walked together past the shelter they had built, now surrounded by green vines and strange flowers, the garden pulsing with life. They had planted seeds both in soil and in each other, and now they were blooming, reaching for sky and stars without chamois. A small device chirped quietly from inside their home, the beacon pulsing softly with new messages, ships passing by offering peace, visitors asking to learn from them, voices from across the galaxy drawn not by war or power but by the echo of something deeper. Zira held the device in her hand and smiled, we are no longer alone. Jack, others are listening, others are ready. Jack nodded and said, then let us teach them. Not with weapons, not with orders, but with presence, with truth, with the bond we built. Without trying, without permission, without further. They stepped into the center of the valley, a place where Zira had carved a circle into the earth. A space for gathering, for sharing, for becoming. The sky above them was open wide and blue, filled with new birds that had begun nesting in their trees, creatures that had adapted to their presence as if the planet itself had accepted their love as part of its own rhythm. Zira closed her eyes and placed both hands on the ground, sending a pulse of light through the soil. The trees responded with a gentle rustle, the wind carrying whispers not of language but of recognition. Jack stood beside her, his own hand pressed into the earth, their energy merging not as alien and human, but as one. In the years that followed, their home became a sanctuary, not for escape but for arrival. Beings of all shapes and colors came seeking more than shelter. They came for the truth of what Jack and Zira had discovered, a truth older than stars and newer than breath, that to be truly alive, one must allow the heart to lead even when it trembles on. Night under a silver moon, Jack lay beside Zira in the tall grass, their hands intertwined, and their eyes reflecting the galaxy above. He whispered, "Do you remember the moment you touched me first in the forest, your hand on my arm, your eyes so wide and filled with wonder?" Zira smiled and said, "I remember thinking your skin held fire. Your soul hummed like a storm, and your silence said more than any word. I remember choosing to feel, even though I was taught not to, and now I cannot imagine being anything less than fully awake." Jack kissed her forehead and said, "Then let us never sleep. Let us keep dreaming with our eyes open, building with our hearts open, and giving without keeping." They stayed like that for hours, unmoving yet more alive than ever, as the stars danced above them, as the wind carried the promise of all things becoming, as the universe watched to souls who should have never met and yet had become the proof that love does not ask for permission, that truth does not care for rules, and that sometimes a crash is just the beginning of something eternal. The end.